Yes, Bjorn and Henry, it's nice talking to you guys.
Nice to
First
meet
of
you.
all, yeah, Gutterdämmerung. Explain a bit the project. Is it a movie? Is it a spectacle? What can we expect? What is it about?
I just asked one of our PA guys who works for Motorhead as well. Asked him like, what do you think the rockers are going to think about it? And he said like they're going to be flipping because it's everything. It's a bit of theater, it's a bit of film, and it's rock and roll at the same time. It's going to blow their mind. So that was a good reaction from that side. But it's most definitely a mixture of all. I think it's immersive cinema, I would say, and at the same time it has an old school touch to it. You know? I don't know what you think, Henry, how you would phrase it.
Well, I would go along with what you said. I mean, it's a mixture of media. So it's like going to a rock concert, but it's enhanced. And when you go to a rock concert, it's always better than your records because it's, you know, there's other people. The band is a physical thing when the music is actually hitting your body, coming from bigger amplification than you have at home.
Yeah.
It's more emotional. But with this, you're watching people go through this intense experience just to hear some rock and roll. Where we can just buy a ticket and go to a show and it's easy. For the people in this film, they're either trying to preserve rock and roll or destroy rock and roll. And I think the people watching will fall down very decidedly on one side or the other. I kind of think which side they're going to fall on. So all of a sudden they are rooting for rock and roll. And maybe it makes them realize what they have to lose. And so to me, it's a very emotional journey through something that is already familiar. Like me and rock and roll, I've been digging it since I was very young. But I've never thought about it in this way. And when you see it and with the way it's set up, you actually will feel it. And there's fire, and there's smoke, and there's a band, and there's things to watch, and there's people you recognize in much different contexts. There's Lemmy, you know, there's Iggy Pop, you know, with angel wings. Like, what the hell is going on? Yeah, it's incredible. And what is Grace Jones doing with all of these rock and roll ne'er-do-wells? And so what you get is this extremely eclectic environment. And I think the different kinds of music that you will experience going through Gutterdämmerung speaks to how all music, it can be from any genre, any year, it still taps into, humans listen to it. And there's emotion in country western or in tango music, which is very violent and very beautiful, to any tribal music. It's all coming from heartbeat, from purpose, from a desire to get through life. And when you bring all these musics together, I think it's a good music lesson, that it's all different, but it's all the same.
So the band will play all these genres you're talking about?
Different,
it's not only
different genres.
Of course, the faces we see now is Joshua and then Lemmy and all.
But the band has to be completely schizophrenic.
Okay.
Because they're going from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s up to now. And they pull it off extraordinarily well. I don't know how they do it, but they do it, they make it seem pretty effortless.
It's unbelievable. You sit with them in the studio, you ask them like, you know, I think I'd love to hear this under these images. And they'll just play you. They'll be like, yeah, well, how was that again? And it take them, I think, 30 seconds to sort of rehearse it. And then after a minute, you're hearing a perfect track. And they're like, it was off. And I'm like, what the fuck was off? This is perfect. But it's cool good. Because they play with Iggy also. They tour with Iggy. And they what I think is really interesting with them is they're playing old Iggy tunes that we haven't heard for centuries, like really, really long, you know, not centuries, but really, really long, decades. And all of a sudden they're back there like the way I've never heard them. And it's weird because, you know, you get these bands like Zeppelin also, you can never be able to see them really, very few of us. I'm 46, very few of us have seen Zeppelin really play.
Me neither.
Only the lucky ones who were maybe in Wembley. And then you know, hear this music and it's so perfect and to hear it live. Whereas you know it from a record and it's the most perfect records ever made, you know. That's where I dream all my images from also.
And how did you two end up working together on this project?
Well, I had a friend in Germany who introduced me to, he's one of the big promoters, like our Herman Schuurman. So we have a guy called Joe Rambok in Germany. He had seen my show with the Hives. And he told me, if you ever make a show like that, you know, audiovisual thing, I'll support you. And you call me anytime you need somebody. And I had talking to Grace about it, and Juliette Lewis, the main character in the film, is called Juliet after Juliette Lewis.
Okay.
And they were sort of talking me into it, like, you know, you should be more American, try this, don't be afraid, don't be so European, just have to do it.
Because it's quite ambitious.
And then I was like, yeah, I mean, I need advice on my story, I don't know if it's good. And I'm not a writer, I'm a visual writer. I write with imagery like Swedish people, you know, like we make films with visuals, whereas Belgians are amazing with words. And I was just not confident with my story. So I think, who is the greatest voice in rock and roll, the smartest voice alive in rock and roll, in my opinion? I mean, there's a lot of these people that I've met along the road are smart, but Henry's really clever. And they put us in contact, and I remember, Henry, you told me, like, I'm doing a show, and I know Henry's very serious when he does stuff. And he told me, I have 15 minutes. And then we ended up, I think we talked about 3 hours in a row.
And what was it
I was
called?
like, damn, he seems to like the idea. And then it was 3 hours in the Raamtheater.
Okay.
How was that place?
And how was it afterwards, after that first meeting? How was the collab then? Did you meet a lot?
As I remember, he described the project, which was, it's like trying to describe a mountain range. It's such a huge idea if you can't see it. Now that I've been seeing it, I'm like, oh, I got it. Yeah. But when he's just describing it, it'll be 2 screens and sometimes 3 screens, the rear projection, like this director in 1926. I'm like, okay. And he was very sure of what he wanted to do. And so he said, here's the story. And he had a storyboard, some drawings. He was like, can you write what they're going to say in this scene? I'm like, I'm not a screenplay writer. He said, well, would you try? I'm like, well, yeah. And if you don't like it, fine. I mean, I won't be surprised. And so I think the first scene I wrote is the scene where we see Iggy Pop converse with God and decide that Earthlings are bored, and he kind of starts rock and roll, which is perfect for Iggy Pop to do. And that was the first scene I wrote, basically on spec. Like, if this doesn't suck, maybe we can do more. Because I'm on tour, I'm busy. I have a show a night, which is pretty nerve-wracking for me. And Bjorn said, yeah, this is great. Now can you...
great every time, you know. I was like, yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, yeah.
So can you write this scene? I'm like, well, yeah. And I'd find a night off or a moment. So I don't have many nights off on tour. And then at one point, I started another film called He Never Died. And I star in it, so I got a lot of responsibility. But it's a Canadian production, and they're merciful. So we had only a 5-day shoot week. I'm used to a 6-day shoot week, where they just kind of kill you. And so I had Saturday and Sunday off in Toronto, and I would work. I would divorce myself from this insane character I am Monday through Friday, and go into screenplay writer mode, and write. Because he would send in for rewrites, or hey, I have a new idea. How about this scene does that instead? I'm like, okay, man. And we kind of would converse via email, the occasional phone call. And then once he started casting people, Bjorn started coming to America a lot, like he was using an airplane like a crosstown taxi. Because a lot of these meetings, to get talent on board, you really need to sit down with them.
You have to see them now.
Yeah, otherwise their manager...
It's too difficult to explain, I guess.
Their manager will just go, thanks, great, click, and you'll never get to the artist. So you got to just show, I flew all the way from Belgium or Sweden, and I really need to talk to your guy.
And if you so afraid it would leak also. So I was always with this laptop.
And if you show up in person, maybe you can talk to Tom Araya. But there's a good chance his manager or any other manager will go, there's a movie, it's a silent film, but it's not. And a band plays, okay, great, because they get wacky phone calls all the time.
I guess.
And that borders on wacky phone call because the idea is so epic. But quite honestly, not to blow the proverbial smoke, after I met Bjorn, I had no doubt in my mind whatsoever that he would get it done. Like when I met him...
That's very weird too, you know, like you and Iggy got it really early. You, Iggy and Grace. And you're the ones who were unconditional. And I thought that's like, for me, I told it many times to my wife who produced this film, like, you know, very hard to produce a film with no money and like crazy ideas, but she's used to that. But I said it to her many times, there's 3 people who just started this unconditionally because they have the gut feeling for good stuff, I guess. And you were so similar, like my good friend Grace, I worked with many times in other shows. But still, like, it's like, she said, like, at a certain moment, she said, it's like an octopus. and everybody's of these kind of people are connected to the same octopus. And I thought that's such a great way to say it because it's really true. And the weird thing is like the same with Iggy. Iggy was just like, he's the first guy I put on film. And Iggy was looking at it, and you never know, like, you know, he's like, I think Henry told me he's like a hyena, he can change. Like, but he's really nice. We're sitting in his garden in Miami, and he's like, and he's looking at me, and he's like, yeah, that's really punk, actually. You're never going to pull it off. You're crazy. You're totally crazy, but we're going to do it because it's
just because
it's
of that.
punk, because fuck it, we jump in a black hole, because that's what it's about. So that's cool, and then I think he liked the aesthetic of it. And Henry was similar, and Grace was similar. And then I think when you have three heavyweights like that, you have the rock and roll champion of the world. I think, in my opinion, the most iconic living artwork being Grace Jones, working with all my big heroes like Jean-Paul Goude and you know, everybody I adore. Like that's why me and Grace get along very well, because we have the same visual language. We work a lot with fashion people. Like we have the same DNA. And then you have, in my opinion, a person who has the best voices rock and roll through words.
And one of the best bands ever.
Yeah, from one of the best bands ever. Yeah, I think.
And was it easy to
then
convince
it was easier to convince the others, because the others are like, Lemmy was also very easy, because actually Lemmy I've seen even earlier. But Lemmy, then he had a time where he felt bad, so it was harder for him to see him and to do it. So he ended up doing it in the end. But he liked it from day one. He had the first drawings I ever had, and I was there with Joe Rambock, and I'm a huge Motorhead fan. I don't miss any Motorhead gig. And I was there backstage, and he was sitting there with this girl on his lap, and a one-armed bandit. and he's just looking at it, and it took I think 1 minute to explain him, and he loved it.
And what did you guys?
He just said, "I need a tiger tank. I want a tiger tank."
So you pulled off a tiger tank.
We made him a tiger tank.
And apparently the hero of this movie, or the main character, is a guitar. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and everyone is either trying to get it and liberate it, or destroy it and destroy rock and roll, because it's the gateway to freedom. And my character doesn't like rock and roll because he can't control those who think for themselves, and rock and roll helps you think for yourself. But thankfully, rock and roll always wins, and that's been proven in history.
That's the irony also, like Henry being the opposite of what he represents for me in real life. Like I wrote all those characters pretty much like that. Like, I mean, who would be the worst angel on earth would be probably Iggy, I guess. And then,
so you ended up
they're all playing in verses or things which are weird for them. You know, like who would ever think of Henry as a priest?
Yeah. And how did it feel to
Well, it was fun to write the scene. I just use a lot of Old Testament imagery, very, kind of Sturm und Drang, and, hellfire awaits you, and basically making all of your followers fear me, fear God. That is not a loving God, it's an angry God that basically punishes those who aren't so righteous. They're just not always trembling. It's just fun to yell and be threatening, and
you're very good at it.
So perhaps there is a priest in Henry Rollins.
Well, there's certainly certain kind, in my opinion.
But to me, religion, as far as I remember it, I was never raised with it. It's always been kind of terrifying, and it's, to me, crowd control. And obviously, that's not. There's 80 million gajillion ways to interpret religion. I think it's down to each individual.
Of course.
But for me, it was always like, we don't have democracy yet, so we'll make everyone terrified, and we won't have cops. And then you have all of a sudden, some people go, you know what? I'm going to take that bucket of water, and so the Bible doesn't always work, or whatever the religious text was. And so I made the priest into a terrifying, oppressive, anti-rock person. To write it was pretty easy. To do the acting was fun. And I think that's very real. I went to a prep school for boys. We wore the ridiculous uniform and said, yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am a lot. And these people didn't like music, because if you're rocking out, you are not kind of succumbing to their authoritarian rule. And rock and roll's always been this great way to just go, nope, not me. Yeah. I'm going to be me, not going to be you. Yeah. And rock music, or any music, really allows you to customize yourself and say, this is, you put on your rock shirt, it has Ramones on it or whatever, and you go, that's who I am. Yeah. These guys represent me.
It's your identity.
Yes, you know,
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
help
Or
it.
you build
I'm
up
one of
your
those
own
kids.
identity with rock bands. Huh?
I'm not a kid anymore, but I'm one of those.
And it saves you. Rock and roll music saves you. I mean, that's
Let me
a
say this,
very
the best
generic
way,
statement.
Let me say this: the best way to get back at people without hurting them. You can get back at them.
Yeah.
In a cool way, you
Yeah.
know, like. And that's why I guess why our slogan is: if you don't like it, fuck off. I think Henry and Lemmy said it in one interview together, like almost in choir, like.
I just finished interviewing Lemmy. It's on one of our trailers.
I've seen it.
And he says, if you don't like
It's
it,
so
and I know
knew.
it.
It's the end, the conclusion.
And I knew what was coming out, and so I just I was sitting next. Well, you've seen it. I was sitting next to him, and I just went like, knowing he would say it, and I happened to do it at the perfect time.
really
and I
incredible,
kind
yeah.
of
Perfect
watched. I was just
timing.
like, we did that.
I have to rewatch that.
And then when I watched it on the film, I can see that we really. It looked choreographed, but it wasn't. It was a one take.
And
It
there's
just
exactly
happened.
the same little lights in their
Yeah,
eyes.
yeah.
But I knew
You're folding the
exactly.
book and really enjoying the moment. I had a feeling.
I've hung out with Lemmy many. I'm very lucky. I've been a fan since I was like a teenager, and got to meet him in the '80s. And then I see him now and then over the years, and we have a great deal of respect for each other. And I think that's one of the reasons he came into Gutterdämmerung when he saw other people, like me and Iggy and other people, and met Bjorn. He was like, okay, because he's a guy who determines whether you are full of it or not very quickly. Because
He has a high bullshit detector.
yeah,
I can
because
tell
he
you,
doesn't have any. He's one of the most bluntest, most
Okay.
honest. He's a real sweet guy. But you'll play him like, some new record of yours. It's crap. You're like, wow. And he doesn't mean, he's just being honest. He doesn't mean anything mean by it. I did a big music seminar with him once. I sat next to him and I went off on some extrapolated musical theory, and he just looked over in front of like 1,500 people and went, that's crap. I'm like, thanks. Thank you.
He also asked when I had the kid. It was a kid drawn a bit like what's his name, Paul Weller,
Yeah.
by our storyboarder, because he just uses faces from rock and roll sort of to make his storyboard.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Who's the mod?" And I'm like, "Is it Paul
It's the
Weller?"
Oddfather.
No, Paul Weller's a cunt.
And apparently you even named some awards after him, no?
Yeah.
This movie already won 4 or 5 golden Lemmys?
I was sitting with him in the Rock am Ring, showing him the footage of the trailer and all that. And we're talking about anti-establishment and like all these things. And we're talking about prizes also, like how I think a lot of the prizes in the world are great and they're contests for a reason. But I was thinking, like, imagine if you have this Oscar for anti-establishment, like a big fuck you to Hollywood. We should call it the Golden Lemmy. And then his smile came on his face. I like it. And so that's
Even
how it was
when it's
born.
gold, yeah.
We didn't really design it because everybody knows that it's this.
Yeah. Okay, I have to. Just one question. You did some rehearsals today with
yesterday.
the movie and
Yep,
all of it. I guess it must be
it's
the
fun.
first time
Yeah.
you see everything.
Yeah,
How it will be live.
Pretty
and-
overwhelming.
I was
To stand in front of it and watch it, it's bigger than it was described to me
Okay.
years and years ago when Bjorn said it's going to be like this. You're like, okay, whatever. Because we're sitting with a laptop open in a dressing room. You really can't imagine
No,
much.
of course, yeah.
But then when you hear the band hit it, and these guys are like working off, it's choreographed. So like when the actor does this, the band does this, and it's all very put
But
together.
the timing is so important, I guess, with this
Yeah,
silent
well,
movie. So
thankfully-
how difficult is it to?
They have freedom. They have freedom. The format is written in a way that there's pieces of film, but that there's always freedom for the band to freewheel.
Okay.
So because this is really like a super deluxe band, they're used to playing free with Iggy, whatever, and we give them the liberty. But we give the liberty to. We probably have different guests coming in also. We may have a Belgian guest coming in. We may have somebody really young who's never played on stage that we really like. It may be Black Box Revelation or the Dickaloo. I hope we do one. We do one with Clément Pérez. Like,
Clément
he's
Pérez.
probably after Lemmy the most rock and roll guy in the world, But that's the idea, and the idea could just as well be one of our stars joining, but it doesn't have to be. But there's freedom, because if you get a guest like Lemmy or whoever, you don't want him to be stuck to a film.
Okay.
And like any guest that comes in should have the liberty to play and rock out. Like you've seen the Led Zeppelin part in the end. It's a very good example. That's not fit to the film. completely free. We had Alain Johannes there from Crooked Vultures just rocking out with the Iggy guys. And then you get magic, you get these jams and you get real rock and roll. So it's a constant mix of taking them back in the film as a red line and going back into freedom after that.
And will we see it at a Belgian festival?
Oh, I think so. I heard rumors from Belgian promoters.
Rumor has
like
it. That's good.
Yeah,
That's good to
I heard
know.
rumors.
Okay,
But
looking forward
we'll be there. I mean, we first have to rehearse a little because Belgians are critical and they have good taste. And I'm nervous. I'm nervous to show it.
I'm already looking forward to it. Guys, thanks a lot for the chat.
Okay, thank you very much.
Studio Brussel.